All right, everyone. Welcome to another edition of AssetMule's Office Hours. I'm Justin Dorfman. I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO of AssetMule, and I'm super excited for this conversation today. Dan from Toast, we were just chatting in the green room, if you will, and you were sharing some of the stuff that you're working on. And I was already excited before you started sharing that stuff, but man, I'm stoked to dive in because there's so much that I think folks that are listening in today can learn from how are you using AI to really scale that top of the funnel motion. And as you were saying, also inform the outbound motion, which is really, really interesting. So really excited to dig in to some of this. For those that are tuning in today live, this is an AMA. So if you have questions, as I have a ton of questions for Dan, but if you have questions as well, I will be sure to sprinkle those in, make sure that you get your questions answered. So definitely, if you're listening to this on LinkedIn or on YouTube, just add it as a comment. We'll see it come in and I'll add it to the screen here and sprinkle it in. If you're listening to this after the fact, as a recording on LinkedIn or YouTube, still ask your questions and tag Dan, tag myself, and we'll make sure that we get to those after the fact. But without further ado, let's dive in today. Dan, thanks so much for taking the time here today. And maybe for those that aren't familiar with you, maybe you can give us a little bit about your background, how you became the retail SDR manager at Toast. You're mentioning some of the previous roles that you had that sort of like led to this. So maybe you can give us a little bit of a career journey and then a little bit of an intro on what you're working on over there at Toast. And then as I said, I have a ton of questions that I'd love to throw your way.
Sounds good. Well, I'm so happy to be here. Thanks, Justin. Yeah, over here at Toast right now, it's been a career journey, to say it lightly. Been in sales since getting out of school at University of Miami with my background in chemistry. Never thought I would be in sales from 2015 to here in 2025. Been in 4 different industries, but made the transition to tech about 3.5 years ago. Just before joining Toast in May of this year, I was over at Twilio, where I was working on the Twilio segment CDP outbound motion for our commercial team, really supporting, I think it was around 60 to 70 territories, and had a great opportunity to come over here to Toast in May of this year, where I sit at really the intersection of sales and marketing, really kind of taking the SDR manager role to a different position in that not just coaching field reps and setting appointments, but really understanding what is driving our customers to Toast. We have a new vertical in retail. A lot of individuals know us in restaurant. So understanding our campaigns, what is successful, where is our product market fit, and how can we replicate that? And then taking that into the outbound motion, where I started managing outbound reps as well on October 1st. So I'm really excited about the conversation and where we're looking at things, where we're hoping to take things, but also where the industry's kind of been and where it's looking to go.
Yeah, really interesting topics, I think, here around AI and signal-based selling and all kinds of cool stuff that we can get into. I guess to start to kind of lay the land, or I guess the framework of the conversation here today. What do you think has changed when it comes to top of funnel, when it comes to inbound? Obviously, we've got this new AI thing, right, that everybody's trying to figure out. But we mentioned like signals and all these tools and indicators, I think, that are really interesting. So what are you seeing from your vantage point? What are the sort of biggest shifting and moving pieces that are sort of requiring kind of like a new role? When you describe your role, I think this is something that's brand new. We used to have like inbound SDR, outbound SDR, sales, and that was sort of its own place. And then marketing was a kind of completely different segment. And there was crossover and working together, but this role that lives kind of in the, I guess the like in between sales and marketing and in between the inbound and outbound is so interesting. So what sort of is shifting out there that's led to the need for this role that you've taken on?
Yeah, I think what we recognize is that SDRs and BDRs can give us such valuable insights, but it's about empowering them to have enough conversations to give us true mature data. When I've been in previous roles, it might have been spending the entire day making 200 calls to talk to 40 people and maybe be on the phone for an hour and a half out of an 8-hour workday. On the SDR, BDR side, you might make 65 to 80 calls to talk to 4 to 5 prospects, and maybe one or two of those conversations last past 120 seconds, 2 minutes plus. And so it's hard to really understand is like, where are we winning when we have such few conversations? Because the reps aren't having the ability to really be enabled and have that repetition to become masters at their trade. And so with looking at it from not just a productivity standpoint, because that's where a lot of people say, hey, let's implement AI. We're going to make 200 times more calls, right? We're going to have an output that's out of this world. But if the output's going in the wrong direction, you're not doing anything that's productive for both your reps, which AI is here to enable reps and make them better sellers, but also faster career progression. But it's also to make them be able to do the job that 2, 3 individuals did in that 8 hours, not asking them to work more, but working smarter, not harder. Like we've talked about so often, grew up with that phrase, working smarter, not harder. And it's about AI and leveraging that to find the best data. But so often people are trying to put in AI, put a Band-Aid on it when they don't take the foundation and recognize, hey, I need to understand my tech stack, my customer data. Why are customers coming to me? So then I can replicate that in an outbound motion, because nothing better than understanding a customer that you were not marketing to and your product market fit is right there. And if you miss out on that opportunity, your competition's going to fit in that spot, or a new startup's going to come in and take that. So it's really about understanding where we win, how do we replicate that, and how do we do it to a greater scale by enabling our reps to be true professionals in all aspects of any new campaign or any new product feature. There's too many product features that are happening every single month for each SDR, BDR to feel fully enabled, but we can do our best to give them the practice and the repetition so that they can go out there and execute to the best of their ability.
Yeah, and one thing that you mentioned right before we hit live here, which kind of blew my mind, and I want you to unpack it maybe a little bit for us here, is, when I've been talking to most SDR teams, what I've been hearing is, we have, a handful of inbound reps, but or maybe even like we've downsized our inbound team. We're automating a lot of that stuff with AI now. And where we're really hiring is on the outbound side, because we need to get more leads. We need to like do more volume, as you said, right? And what you told me before this call was that you actually have a far bigger inbound team than outbound team. Really, really interesting. So maybe you can unpack that for us here. Like, how many inbound reps SDRs do you have versus outbound, and why? What's the reasoning behind having that outsized inbound team? Because again, it's kind of against the grain of at least what I've seen out there. But I'm sure there's like a really, really interesting insight in terms of why you guys have placed that bet.
Yeah, so on the restaurant side of things, we have that double-digit amount of SDR inbound teams. My team, I've only got 3 inbound reps and 5 outbound reps. So on our retail division, the newer features and newer verticals we're standing up, we have our outbound teams, in fact. And
Makes
so
sense.
what's interesting with our inbound teams is that we're not just working first party like requests. So often it's like inbound teams are just working those demo requests, but what about those third party intent requests, and allowing our outbound team to truly become experts at outbounding, like pure outbound, where the inbound team is almost a pseudo AE when they get that Chili Piper meeting on the calendar that a prospect just books time, so they get those opportunities for that full disco. But there's also these kind of pseudo outbounding opportunities for them where they might be coming through a third party website that's needing some information on a point of sale system. We're not going to be the only ones reaching out. And that's where our inbound team, we can actually develop these reps. And so that's the biggest part, is enabling and investing in our capital, in our reps, our employees, making sure that they get the type of empowerment they need to take that next step in their career, and not just being siloed into this, oh, it's a demo request just for Toast. And so we're able to take this inbound motion, make it almost this hybrid motion, and then take outbound and make that purely outbound and figure out how we win there. So it's been a very cool progress and progression for our organization. It's exciting to see where things are going to go next, as we just started implementing some new technology to really take these reps from a 2019, 2020 tech stack into 2025 and beyond.
So let's dig into that a little bit, because I was going to ask you, I think this is it's like the holy grail, right, of SDR. When you think about like inbound reps then empowering outbound strategy, right? And I think again, it's holy grail, but it's very seldom seen in practice, right? So I'm assuming there's both an incentive structure that sort of can enable that or enforce that, but there's also like very clearly a tech stack that's needed to be able to get the inbound data or insights that then pass on to the outbound rep through some mechanism that then drives their outbound. So maybe you can tell us a little bit more about what that motion looks like. What tech stack is in place, or what you're thinking about putting in place, even if you don't mention the vendors specifically, or you can, but like the type of tooling that you're putting in place, and then how that motion actually looks in practice. Let's say, like you said, a lead comes from an interesting industry that's different than you expected, and how it all kind of flows through to the outbound strategy.
Yeah, I mean, it's what I'm working on today and this entire week and this month and the last several months. So it's a easier said than done, right? And that's the art of all of this. And that's the beauty and the fun part about this, especially in late 2025, going into 2026. How do we use this AI to drive that motion? So where we really look at things is the first part is starting out with enabling the inbound team to be able to speak to our functionality and how we win. So when we're having different campaigns, making sure that we use different AI bots to give them that training so that they can be enabled to have these conversations, because it'd be inappropriate for us to look at data on inbound and just say, hey, we ran a new campaign or launched a new product feature, but we didn't enable them to speak to that. And then say, oh, it didn't really work well. Well, they couldn't speak to it. They felt more comfortable when they saw a different lead come in from a different type of business category. So enabling them first to ensure that we can get the right data as we go along. The second part to that is ensuring that we have an understanding of who are our different businesses that we work with. How are we going to define them? And what is our source of truth for that definition? That way we can then fully understand, once we start getting this data in, what direction do we go? The third part to that is ensuring that we have enough data points, and how we get there is by having more conversations. So instead of just clicking dial and waiting for somebody to pick up, actually having a day full of conversations and blocking off time for conversations, not for dialing. I think that is such a big switch for an SDR or BDR today, is to think of their time blocking as time for conversations versus time for dialing. Dialing is not a revenue generating activity. Having conversations truly is, even if it's not a yes. We took my team individually, the SDRs improved in October when we implemented a new AI dialing tool on October 1st. They went from connecting with 79 prospects a month to more than doubling that, and it was 169 prospects that they each connected with in October. So in September, we were looking at 79, in October, 169. Obviously, that gave us such great data to work with. And now what we're recognizing is that we're winning in spots that we didn't think we were going to win in. And what we could take is taking the outbounding and where was the proportion of activities focused on versus the ops created, and then incorporate kind of a Venn diagram of what was coming in and where inbound succeeded. And what we found is that basically 90% of our activities are driving 70% of our opportunities. And so there's room for improvement. And that's the biggest key, is not making a 180-degree change, but really ensuring the reps understand why we're going in the direction we're going and making these incremental changes as we go. One thing that we observed as well was like, hey, having conversations is great, but if we're not converting on those conversations, that's another issue in itself. And so it takes also an opportunity to go in and enable the reps on technology. And I think that gets skipped far too often, is that we roll out something, we start getting all these connects and say, hey, you had 100% more connects. Why don't we have 100% more opportunities? And if it was that easy, right, anyone could do it. And so it's really about making sure, once again, they're not only enabled on our products, on our campaigns, but also on the technology that they're using so they can use it to the nth degree. And it all comes down to organization and being prescriptive and giving that guidance, but also being open to feedback and recognizing, hey, the direction we go today might not be the direction we go tomorrow. And what requires us to keep moving forward is team buying into our ultimate vision. And our ultimate vision being that we grow this vertical, but we have a team vision, not just an individual goal, because things are going to continue to move. And if we don't have this sounding board from coming from inbound and outbound, we're not going to have the differentiating factor that we have today.
Absolutely. So, are you open to going a little deeper into the tech stack that you're using? Again, like if you don't want to mention vendors, that's totally fine. But it sounds like to me there's got to be some sort of, uh, I guess, AI coaching tool you mentioned, like, or maybe sales enablement tool where as you're releasing new features, reps are understanding those features and like getting trained on them in some way, maybe a CRM in the middle where all that data sort of gets fed in. It sounded like there's some dialing tools and stuff like that. So yeah, maybe you can like kind of give us the couple of buckets of tools that you guys are using and how they connect together and how the sort of opportunities, leads, and data kind of flows through them.
Yeah, absolutely. So we use several different trainers. We use Nooks as is an AI partner of ours for the
Mm.
dialer. We use them for a bot trainer, but also really prescriptive in terms of the different business categories as well as the different objections. So taking them through that and giving them different levels of difficulty. It's something we began exploring in October and are going to take it to that next level here in Q4 and going into Q1. We also use Udly. Udly is phenomenal for the type of sales strategy we run as an organization, which is through the Sandler methodology. So we're able to enable them both on just like sales acumen and then on product acumen with Nooks. When we get a lead that comes in, it comes in through Salesforce. We're going to be uploading that into SalesLoft into a cadence that's already predefined. That's key too. It's like taking out that manual effort for reps so they can focus on the conversations. And I'll bring that up probably a couple more times. But bringing it into that cadence and then ensuring that we have that cadence hooked into Nooks, and where Nooks gives us the ability is multitude of facets. One is having these conversations, right? We're having more connections because more time is spent on the phones versus just pressing dial. The second part to it too is that it comes with organization. So when we're looking at different leads, we need to organize them and how we're going to approach it. So what I mean by that is it's very easy in the B2B space to call 4 different personas in 4 different business units in 4 dials. That's like me going to the gym and doing biceps for one thing and then going and doing leg press and then running one for 30 seconds on the treadmill and leaving. Like, I'm not going to get better, right? So having this repetition starts with organization. So what we look at tagging these different prospects based upon how they are categorized. That's where I work with the reps to ensure they have a process that works for them, but also giving them structure to go with that. So we have the lead comes in through Salesforce. It's tagged in SalesLoft based upon the criteria we use to define it. Then we have different blockings through Nooks to make these dials. We have a specific lead flow that may come in from an event type or a third-party source that is more on the colder side than on a hot lead side of things. And what we'll do is we'll dedicate time on a Thursday afternoon to call these specific leads because they've been tagged. But before we dive into that, we're going to have them be able to go through this bot, have this conversation for 5 minutes, go through that practice, and then jump on the phones. It's where I'm thinking of it from a perspective of how do we operate for the rest of our lives. We warm up before we try and go do anything for sports. Otherwise, we're going to get injured or we're just not going to be good at it. And so really being able to take reps through how they live their personal lives through a professional lens really allows them to go and execute to the nth degree.
That's super interesting. So just to clarify, did you mention that uh, they're doing these warm up calls? So is that with like a AI persona that they're doing before they actually make the calls to kind of get, like you said, warm up, get some reps in?
Yeah, so I did this in a prior life and it was more manual. It was here's your prospect, go off Zoom, go into your breakout rooms. Here's your 2 objections and y'all are going to go back and forth and then we're going to jump into a call blitz. Now what we're looking at being able to do is take specific business units, specific categories. So that's on the outbounding side of things and say, hey, this is who our personas are. Here's your practice for that. But then in terms of marketing and that intersection of sales and marketing, this is where my marketing counterparts are so phenomenal here at Toast, is that they're always asking, hey, do you think this is going to work? Do you think this is going to work? And so one thing that we started working on is, while we start launching some new campaigns here in November and December, it's like, hey, what is the message we're providing? What is the use case that we're driving? So when we see this come in, what kind of objections should we anticipate? And now it's about having marketing kind of fuel and give me the fuel to insert into the bot for them to practice on in Nooks and then go and execute in reality.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, that is like game-changing stuff, in my opinion. I did manage an SDR team in my previous life, and we definitely did role playing. And as you said, it was much more manual. But being able to do that, like at any point in time, right before you jump on a call to kind of warm up is really, really game-changing. I'm curious, what about on the call itself? You mentioned like marketing is supporting the SDR with content and information that they can use to fuel these conversations. Are they sort of getting access to that prior and post call, or are you doing any sort of like real time coaching when they're on the call? I don't know if it's an AI. I've heard about these things. I haven't used any of these tools, but like, an AI tool that's kind of listening, recording the call, and giving them prompts on things that they may want to bring into the conversation. Anything like that you're doing?
Yeah, so Nooks has a couple of features where if they hear a term, it's going to pop up a battle card. They use that terminology. And that's not where we win, because it tends to be 5 seconds later. It has a lag.
Yeah.
So now the
Yeah.
conversation's on to another point. But I can in real time be listening into these conversations. I was doing the same thing on Sales Loft before we were using Nooks. I was listening to my reps and then leveraging Slack, and they knew, hey, Dan's listening in. I might be getting some feedback. And that's where I actually learned this when I started in financial services sales. When I was at Fisher Investments, we would wear headsets with each other, and I was a training coordinator over there. And so it'd be about feeding lines to an individual while they're going through the sale in real time and getting that real time feedback. And so now in this remote environment, it's really about being able to be in that position to give that real time feedback. And now with Nooks, I can actually, after the call, I say, hey, are you good to huddle? And I pull them over to the side, and we kind of have this conversation of like, hey, how do you think things went? What would we do differently? But also, hey, was my feedback fair in that moment? Do you want feedback at that time?
Mm-hmm.
Really
Yep.
Understanding how to coach each individual is critically important as well, because everyone receives feedback in a different way. And so having that real-time feedback can be great, but if somebody is getting then too distracted, I'm not really doing my job as their leader. But now with the Nooks sales floor, that's what it's called, the sales floor, that capabilities, I can dive on at any time and be giving a real-time feedback to them.
Yeah, that's really cool. That makes a lot of sense. That's the thing that I've struggled the most with, this concept of the real time coaching on the call, is like the lag time, the distraction, and all those things. So it makes a lot of sense that you're able to provide information, but at the same time, a lot of the coaching happens, after the call, just like you would again if we use a sports analogy, right? Like, you've got the huddles and the breaks in between calls where they can get the feedback, and also they can give the feedback back to you on what sort of insights would be helpful for them and when, right? Because everybody, I think, probably has a different comfort level or preference in terms of how they receive that feedback. I'm curious after the call. So it sounds like you're getting a lot of really interesting information as the lead comes in, to qualify them, to route them to the right person, to prep the rep on the conversation. There's the conversation itself, where again, you're feeding some information, but sort of like also letting them do their thing a little bit, right? You have the post conversation with your SDR, where you're coaching them and giving them feedback to improve over time. What does then the follow-up look like? Like, are you doing anything in terms of like surfacing the right content? You mentioned marketing has given you a lot of like great content to send as follow-up, and then like where does it go from there, sort of post conversation?
Yeah, so what we can use each month is these AI scorecards that Nooks leverages, actually built off of Twilio, my old employer. And so really what makes it great is seeing the progress, but taking some of these examples when I'm not there in real time. So I can give the real-time feedback, but what can I do to review those calls when I'm not there? So we take that time during one-on-ones. We do that probably once a month at least. And so that's being able to kind of see, hey, what kind of progress are we making there? But when it comes to really being able to track this over time, one thing that I really pay close attention to is that connect to book ratio. that connect book ratio, but also the dial to conversation ratio. So like how often are we getting to that 61-second mark, that 90-second mark, that 121-second mark? And so often you can kind of break down a call from those different points of view. And I find that if we look at the fundamentals of calling and the fundamentals of sales, it's pretty ubiquitous across industries that it's all needs-based. That's what I found in all the 4 different industries I've worked in, is that regardless of who the prospect is, an individual consumer or a business, it's all about if they have a need and we fulfill that need. And so when we just kind of coach from the fundamentals of sales, I find that that has an everlasting impact on the reps versus just coaching to that moment. So sometimes that objection can be valuable to coach to, but it's more about what did that objection say? And I remember recently working with one of my reps and I said, hey, what was that prospect saying to us when they said, do you have anyone in the area? And do you have any customers in the area? Or where are you calling from? And I said, what they're looking for is trust. That's all they're asking for. They're not asking you to directly answer that, but they need this feeling of trust because they like what they're hearing. They need to trust their gut now. And so when we coach to those types of fundamentals and really bring it back to like a Sandler ideology, which Toast does a phenomenal job of continuous enablement to that coaching model, that I'm actually flying up to Nashville this afternoon to be coached and as a leader to coach my reps to a greater degree for the next 2 days. But if I can coach those fundamentals, the follow-up conversations become a little more nuanced, which is nicer to see. And the progress becomes, oh, we're now getting into conversations, but we're not addressing the competition well. Or, hey, we're not getting into the conversations enough, but you're doing great once you do get into the conversation. So how can we get into more conversations? And it all comes back to focusing on one thing at a time. Gary Keller from Keller Williams, he wrote a great book called The One Thing. And I have my reps, I try to have them focus on one thing. So with all the compounding consequences of that, because it can be overwhelming, all of the coaching. And if we break it back down to the fundamentals and take real-time feedback to be those nuanced conversations, but overall just coach them to being greater salespeople, greater professionals, and growing in their career, we're going to see the progress that we're anticipating.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. And I wanted to shift the conversation a little bit because I know we're coming up on time here. And one question I really wanted to ask you is how you see the future of the SDR role, right? I was worried coming into this conversation or my viewpoint before this conversation was, man, that inbound SDR role, like, is that going to get automated out by AI, right? And one of my hesitations was that I've always felt that there was a really nice career progression when it came to sales in SaaS, right? There was like you're usually the SDR, the inbound SDR, maybe this is their first job out of college, right? So like it's their first introduction, not just to sales but to professional life. So having this role where you can take warmer leads, you can have a couple conversations, you can understand how to qualify, disqualify, build relationships was a really good sort of foundational training to then become the outbound SDR. And then the outbound SDR, where you really earn your sort of like your stripes, right? Prepares you to become the AE. And my worry was that would this all break apart because now the inbound SDR role is gone, right? Eliminated. And what does that mean for these new grads and so on? But it sounds like you guys are actually making it a really strategic role. So I guess all this to say, like, what do you see the future of career progression looking like? What do you see like SDR organizations looking like in 2 to 3 years? Does it break apart and does a role disappear, or does it continue in that way? And it's just sort of like this balance between technology and human.
Yeah, it's such a great question. I think it's actually a role reversal that outbound becomes the entry point. And I heard from a VP last year where the challenge was in 2021, 2022, that SDRs would go inbound for 12 months, then outbound for 12 months, then AE. And then they were losing that rep at month 18 because they're getting an AE gig elsewhere. And so it was, now how do we do both? Well, they're both not, we can't promote into the other. And I see too, when you have an inbound rep that goes into an AE role, they're great at discovery. They can ask those questions. They know how to do the pain funnel, but heck, it's really difficult for them to build out a prospecting structure and understand who should they go after first and how do they actually build a hypothesis and generate cold revenue. And then vice versa, the outbound rep really knows how to call anyone, knows how to book a meeting, but they really don't have that experience in terms of driving a discovery and going down a pain funnel. And so I see the inbound role because, to your point, warmer leads. We used to look at that as, hey, it's an easier transition in, but what if that becomes the promotion? What if that becomes you get greater resources? In finance, that was the direction it went. Over at Fisher Investments, you start out, you don't get inbounds. You have to earn your way to the opportunity to receive inbound flow. And that made it a lot easier, of course, to drive revenue. And so I see that same thing is very applicable here in the tech space of taking outbound, really having AE buy-in to that outbound motion, because AEs drive a lot of that mentorship for an SDR when they're outbounding, teaching them what works, teaching them how to break into an account. If we have that buy-in, we'll get over that entry level, kind of hurdle. And then we can make the inbound role where they're starting to develop those true discovery skills and make an inbound lead. Maybe that next step when they are introduced to an AE is a demo. And it's a different sales cycle there that we're speeding it up because we're seeing that warmer intent. Right? The quicker we make this sales cycle, the more wins we're going to see. If we take an inbound rep that's proven themselves in outbound and is now solely focused on discovery and can drive this amazing discovery call, and we have an established standard operating procedure to set up that AE's demo, now we've got a different type of sales cycle working, which makes sense because we're meeting the prospect where they are. Right now, we're kind of trying to fit a round peg in a square hole. And the biggest issue with that is that an outbound meeting is different than an inbound meeting. And we naturally understand that, but we take them through the same sales cycle and very often. And I think if we change the role definition, we give reps more resources that they've earned while earning their stripes. And then we define two different sales cycles. We're going to see greater wins and allow AI to really thrive with both the human capital aspect of it and the human development side of things.
Yeah, you're actually the second person to mention that to me, that they see that sort of career progression reversing. So I think there's really something there, and it makes a lot of sense now with the tooling and sort of where everything's going. We are at time, and this was such a rich conversation. I'm sure there's so many more pieces that people tuning in would want to unpack. If somebody's listening in on this and whether they're building out this motion of, inbound to outbound, and the tech stack to support it, and they want to pick your brain on some of the topics that we touched on, or whether it's a SDR that wants to learn more from you and sort of get some coaching, where's the best place that people can reach out to you, connect? Are you open to chatting with folks and sort of continuing the conversation offline?
Yeah, I love mentorship. I love having conversations. I think echo chambers are not the greatest way for us to progress as humans, but also just in business and sharing ideas and insights. So on LinkedIn, I basically respond to everyone that's reached out. There's multiple individuals that have been trying to break into tech, and I've had great conversations with them getting their foot in the door, but also individuals of like, hey, let's have differing opinions and kind of come to a consensus of what works better in different industries. B2B means different things for everyone. It's not all ubiquitous across the board. And so I think the more we look at life being nuanced in this professional SDR, BDR world as being very nuanced and not just looking at the numbers, we're going to find make greater strides. And so happy to answer anything and have conversations with anyone that wants to reach out to me on LinkedIn here.
Awesome. Well, Dan, this has been great. Thanks again for taking the time, sharing what you're working on there. Super exciting. I think for a lot of folks, this is like a great sort of direction for them now to sort of follow in terms of how they're thinking about their SDR team. And I'm sure you'll be hearing from folks that want to unpack it more. So again, thanks for being so generous with your time. And for those tuning in, we do these every Wednesday. We try and bring on really great folks like Dan to share their knowledge, share what they're doing so that you can learn from it. So if you're interested in this type of content, definitely give AssetMule a follow, give myself a follow, give Dan a follow. And we'll be back here in about a week with another session of AssetMule's Office Hours. So thanks again for tuning in, and hope everyone has a great rest of your week.